hotel lobby, a condescending glance, and a shocking revelation that no one saw coming. Amber stepped through the grand revolving doors of the Bristol Hotel in downtown Minneapolis. The sleek marble floor beneath her heels gleamed under the soft glow of modern chandeliers. It was the kind of place that exuded wealth and exclusivity, the kind that demanded your presence match its prestige. But Amber wasn't intimidated. She moved with purpose, her navy blue suit tailored to perfection, the leather portfolio in her hand adding to her polished demeanor. Amber wasn't here to impress anyone. She had nothing to prove. Her confidence came from years of hard work, a relentless drive that propelled her to succeed in a world that often underestimated her. Yet the moment she approached the front desk, the air seemed to shift. The receptionist, a woman in her early 30s with a sharp bob and an expression that could cut glass, didn't bother to look up from her computer. Amber's voice, calm yet assertive, broke through the low hum of the lobby. "Good afternoon. I have a meeting scheduled here," she said, offering a polite smile. The receptionist finally glanced up, her eyes scanning Amber from head to toe. Her lips curved into a smirk, the kind that wasn't meant to be friendly. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" she said, her tone laced with condescension. Amber tilted her head slightly, her smile unwavering. "I'm certain," she replied, her voice steady. But the receptionist wasn't convinced. She leaned forward slightly, resting her elbow on the counter as if to emphasize her authority. "I think you might be mistaken. This is a private establishment not open to just anyone." The words hung in the air, sharp enough to draw the attention of a couple seated nearby. Amber felt their eyes on her, but she refused to let it shake her. She stood taller, her grip tightening on the portfolio. "I'm here for a meeting," Amber repeated, her tone firmer now. "If you could check your system, you'll find my name." But instead of obliging, the receptionist chuckled softly and shook her head, muttering something under her breath that Amber couldn't make out. But she knew it wasn't kind. Amber's pulse quickened, but she kept her composure. This wasn't the first time she'd been dismissed, and sadly, it likely wouldn't be the last. She was here for a reason, and no amount of gatekeeping would deter her. But as the tension simmered, Amber couldn't shake the sense that this moment wasn't just about her, it was about proving a point far bigger than herself. Amber took a steadying breath and pointed toward the receptionist's computer. "If you would kindly check, the meeting is under the name Amber Daniels. I'm sure you'll find it listed." The receptionist's smirk grew into a full-blown smile, but there was no warmth in it. She sighed theatrically, as if Amber's request were an inconvenience. Without even glancing at the screen, she muttered, "I'll check, but I doubt you'll find what you're looking for here." She tapped lazily at the keyboard, her nails clicking loudly against the keys. A pause, then a dismissive shake of her head. "Nope, nothing here for you." Amber leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but commanding. "Can I ask you to look again? It should be there. Daniels. Amber Daniels." The receptionist didn't hide her irritation this time. She crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair. "Look," she said, her tone sharp. "This isn't that kind of place. Maybe try somewhere less exclusive." The words struck Amber like a slap. She held her ground, refusing to let the sting show on her face, but the knot in her chest tightened. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice soft but deliberate. "You heard me," the receptionist said, her expression unchanged. "We have standards here, and I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps a different hotel would be more suitable for your needs." Amber opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, another guest at the counter spoke up. An older woman dressed in an expensive coat gave Amber a once-over and whispered to the receptionist, loud enough for Amber to hear, "Why don't you just ask her to leave? She's obviously not a guest." A flush of heat rushed to Amber's face, but not from embarrassment. It was the kind of anger that simmered beneath the surface, the kind that dared her to say something, to demand the respect she deserved. Amber straightened her shoulders and kept her tone even. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "I've told you why I'm here. It's your job to assist me." But instead of apologizing, the receptionist leaned closer, her voice dropping into a low, patronizing whisper. "I don't think you understand how things work here. People like you don't just walk in and expect to be taken seriously." The words hung in the air, cutting through the quiet murmur of the lobby. Amber felt the weight of eyes on her, some filled with curiosity, others with judgment. But she stood her ground, her fingers tightening on the leather handle of her portfolio. For a moment, the silence felt like a challenge, daring Amber to react. But instead of backing down, she took another step forward. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about confronting a system that let moments like this happen. The tension in the lobby was palpable now, a silent electricity that drew the attention of nearly everyone in the room. A businessman waiting by the concierge desk glanced up from his phone, his brow furrowed. A mother sitting with her 2 children by the lounge area whispered something to her husband, both casting subtle glances in Amber's direction. Amber could feel their eyes on her, the judgment, the curiosity, and even the discomfort. The room seemed to split into 2 types of people, those who looked away, pretending they hadn't noticed, and those who leaned in just enough to catch every word of the exchange. One young man sitting in the corner, dressed in casual business attire, exchanged a glance with the woman beside him. "Why is she even dealing with this?" he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. The woman shrugged, her expression a mixture of sympathy and resignation. An older gentleman near the check-in counter frowned deeply. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat, as if about to intervene, but hesitated. His eyes darted from Amber to the receptionist, then back again. Whatever he wanted to say stayed trapped behind pursed lips. Amber caught fragments of whispers as they rippled through the space. Some guests murmured quietly, debating what was happening, while others simply stared, their expressions impossible to read. Yet no one spoke up, no one stepped in. Amber scanned the room for a brief second. It wasn't just the receptionist's words that hurt. It was the silence. The quiet complicity of onlookers, who seemed to agree that her presence required justification. But not everyone in the room shared that sentiment. A young boy, no older than 10, tugged on his mother's coat. "Mom," he said in a loud whisper, "why is that lady being mean to her?" The mother hushed him quickly, glancing nervously toward the desk. She offered a tight-lipped smile in Amber's direction but said nothing. Amber's chest tightened as she turned her focus back to the receptionist, who stood behind the counter with an air of smug satisfaction. The woman looked almost emboldened by the collective silence, as if the lack of intervention had validated her behavior. Still, Amber refused to let her resolve falter. She knew this wasn't about the whispers or the stares. It was about standing firm in the face of ignorance. "I asked you to check your system again," Amber said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Do your job." The receptionist's smirk faltered for the briefest moment. Amber's composure was unshakable, and it was clear she wasn't going to back down. But before the receptionist could respond, the soft click of polished shoes echoed across the marble floor, a sound that turned heads and shifted the energy of the room in an instant. The sound of deliberate, confident footsteps filled the lobby, cutting through the tension like a blade. Heads turned toward the source, and Amber saw him. A distinguished man in a charcoal grey tailored suit, his silver hair impeccably groomed. He walked with purpose, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on her. "Amber," he called out warmly, his deep voice carrying a note of familiarity that silenced the whispers around them. The receptionist froze, her smug demeanor vanishing as confusion flashed across her face. Amber straightened, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. The man strode up to her, his expression lighting up with pride as he opened his arms. "I hope you haven't been waiting too long, sweetheart," he said, enveloping her in a brief but affectionate hug. Not too long, Amber replied smoothly, glancing sideways at the receptionist, who now stood rigid behind the desk, her face pale. The man turned toward the receptionist, his smile fading into something far more serious. "I assume my daughter's meeting room is ready?" he asked, his tone polite but firm, the weight of authority unmistakable. The receptionist's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Your daughter?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, my daughter," he said, enunciating each word with deliberate precision. "Amber Daniels. Surely you've seen her name on the guest list." The room felt like it had collectively held its breath. The receptionist's eyes darted to the computer screen as her fingers scrambled to type. The smugness, the condescension. It was all gone now, replaced by sheer panic. Amber didn't look away, her gaze steady as the receptionist fumbled through her apologies. I'm so sorry, Mr. Daniels. There must have been a mix-up. I didn't realize—" Mr. Daniels raised a hand, silencing her. His voice remained calm, but there was steel behind his words. "A mix-up? Or did you assume my daughter didn't belong here?" The receptionist's face flushed a deep red as she stammered. I didn't mean—" "Enough," he said sharply, his patience clearly worn thin. "This is a 5-star establishment. I expect all my guests to be treated with respect and dignity. That includes my daughter, no matter what assumptions you might have made about her." Amber watched as her father's words settled over the room. She could see the ripple of recognition in the onlookers' faces, the realization that the man standing before them wasn't just a guest, he was the owner of the hotel. The receptionist's lips trembled as she began to stutter another apology, but Mr. Daniels cut her off again. "Your behavior reflects poorly on this entire establishment. You've embarrassed yourself, and you've embarrassed me. Consider this your formal warning. Another incident like this, and you'll be looking for employment elsewhere." Amber didn't flinch, even as the receptionist's eyes welled with tears. She felt no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, only a quiet relief that her father had spoken the words she didn't need to. Mr. Daniels turned back to Amber, his expression softening. "Shall we?" he asked, gesturing toward the elevators. Amber nodded, her smile returning. As they walked away, she felt the weight of every gaze in the lobby on her. But instead of shrinking under their stares, Amber held her head high, knowing that this moment was about more than justice. It was about setting a standard that everyone deserved. As Amber and her father disappeared into the elevator, the lobby remained silent, the tension lingering in the air. The receptionist stood frozen behind the desk, her face a mixture of humiliation and regret. She avoided the eyes of guests, who were now exchanging hushed conversations about what had just unfolded. In one corner, a couple whispered to each other, their voices carrying faintly. "That was the owner's daughter?" the woman asked, her tone incredulous. "Yes," the man replied. "I mean, look at her. She carries herself like she belongs here. How could anyone think otherwise?" The couple's words echoed what many in the room were likely thinking. Amber's confidence, her composure, it had been clear from the beginning. Yet it wasn't enough to shield her from the receptionist's assumptions. Upstairs in the private conference room, Amber sat across from her father at a polished oak table. She placed her portfolio on the table and exhaled deeply. "Thank you, Dad," she said quietly. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You handled yourself well, Amber. You didn't let her get to you." Amber shook her head. "I've dealt with people like her before. It's frustrating, but I've learned not to let it break me." Her father leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "It shouldn't have to be like that, though. Moments like this are why I started this hotel in the first place. I wanted to create a space where everyone feels welcome, no matter what others might think. And it's clear we still have work to do." Amber nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "It's not just about what happened to me," she said. "It's about what happens to others who don't have someone like you to back them up." Her father's gaze softened, pride evident in his eyes. "You're right," and that's why we need to use this moment to make a change." Back in the lobby, the receptionist remained at her station, her shoulders hunched as she avoided the judgmental looks of passing guests. Mr. Daniels had made it clear that her behavior wouldn't be tolerated, but the lesson extended far beyond her alone. The staff had witnessed the entire ordeal, and the message was loud and clear. There would be no room for prejudice here. Amber and her father's meeting eventually concluded, and as they walked back into the lobby, Amber felt a renewed sense of purpose. Heads turned again as they passed, but this time she didn't feel the weight of their stares. Instead, she felt a quiet strength, knowing she had stood her ground and proven her worth. Not to them, but to herself. As they reached the exit, her father paused, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Amber," he said warmly. "I know you'll do great things." Amber smiled. "I learned from the best." As the revolving doors turned and they stepped outside into the crisp air, Amber couldn't help but reflect on what the day had taught her. Respect and dignity weren't just ideals, they were rights everyone deserved. Her father's presence had amplified her voice today, but the real victory was in refusing to let the world define her. In life, moments like these are inevitable, but how we respond defines who we are. Amber's story is a reminder that standing firm in the face of ignorance isn't just about self-respect, it's about paving the way for others to do the same. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that inspire change and understanding.